The house was quiet, too quiet. That unnatural stillness that only happens when something isn't right. I wasn't supposed to be home. No one knew I was here. I had come back early. Missed a call, forgot my phone charger, some excuse that didn't matter now, because as soon as I stepped inside I heard my mother's voice. Not the casual day-to-day version. This was low, urgent, secretive. I froze just outside the kitchen doorway. He can't find out, not yet. Her voice was tight, a whisper on the edge of breaking. A second voice answered, deeper, male. Not my father. He's bound to suspect something. You're acting different. My pulse hammered. Who the hell was she talking to? I shifted just enough to see through the sliver of space between the doorframe and the wall. My mother stood with her back to me, her arms crossed tight over her chest. And the man, tall, broad-shouldered, standing just a little too close to her, was someone I had never seen before. Not my dad. Not anyone I recognized. A stranger. His hand brushed her arm. She flinched. Don't, she murmured. But she didn't pull away. I sucked in a breath and that tiny sound, barely audible, made her stiffen. Silence. Then she turned, eyes locking onto mine. I saw it. The flicker of panic. The guilt. My stomach twisted. Mom! The man exhaled sharply, stepping back. My mother straightened, smoothing her expression into something unreadable. But her fingers trembled where they clutched the countertop. I was still stuck in place, staring. Because it wasn't just guilt in her eyes. It was fear. And that scared me more than anything. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My mother's fingers gripped the counter, knuckles white, but her eyes never left mine. The man, whoever the hell he was, shifted, jaw tightening like he was waiting for her to say something, anything, to defuse whatever had just detonated between us. I should have said something first, demanded an explanation, shouted. Instead, my voice came out low, tight. Who is he? My mother swallowed hard. I saw the pulse in her throat, the way her breath hitched, and I knew she was deciding whether to lie. And then she did. It's not what you think. That line. That goddamn line. I let out a sharp laugh, disbelief cutting through me like a blade. Then what the hell is it? The man ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like he was already done with this conversation. I should go. But I blocked the doorway. No. You stay. His eyes darkened, a warning. I didn't care. I turned to my mother. Tell me the truth. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, the ground beneath me cracked wide open. Because if it wasn't what I thought, if it really was innocent, why was she acting like this? Why did she look like she'd just been caught committing a crime? Mom! My voice dropped. Tell me. The man exhaled sharply, then muttered, he deserves to know. My mother flinched, her fingers curling into a fist. Not like this. My stomach clenched. Not like what? She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw it, the war behind her eyes. The fear. The regret. And then she said the words that changed everything. He's your father. The air vanished. The room tilted. I shook my head. No, that's... But she didn't blink. Didn't take it back. A sharp, bitter laugh clawed its way out of me. You're lying. She wasn't. Everything inside me twisted, my lungs squeezing too tight. My mind went back, flashes of moments that suddenly felt wrong. The times I caught her lost in thought. The times she told me there were things about the past I wouldn't understand. And this man, the stranger standing inches away from me, he wasn't a stranger at all. He was the truth she had buried. I took a step back, my chest heaving. All this time. She whispered my name, reaching for me. I jerked away. Don't. She froze. The man, my father, exhaled like he had expected this reaction. Like he knew this wouldn't end well. And he was right. Because I wasn't ready for this. For him. For her lies. For any of it. And so I did the only thing that made sense. I left. The silence between us was no longer just silence, it was loaded. A ticking bomb waiting to go off. My mother was still gripping the counter, her fingers white, while the man, him, stood stiff beside her, his face unreadable. But I could feel it. The weight of something huge. And I wasn't leaving this room without answers. I took a step closer, my voice low, sharp. Who is he? My mother inhaled sharply, her chest rising with a breath she never released. The man shifted like he was about to speak, But she stopped him with a look. It's not what you think. The worst possible thing she could have said. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. That's funny because it looks exactly like what I think. The man sighed. Maybe I should. I cut him off. No, you're not going anywhere. He frowned but stayed. My eyes snapped back to my mother. Tell me the truth. Something flickered across her face. Hesitation, guilt. I saw the way her body tensed, the way she was bracing herself for what came next. Mom. My voice was shaking now. Say it. Her lips parted, and for a second I thought she might actually tell me. But then she closed her mouth, pressing her fingers to her temple like she could make this all disappear if she just willed it hard enough. The man stepped forward. He deserves to know. She shot him a look so sharp it could have drawn blood. Not like this. My stomach twisted. Not like what? She turned back to me, and in that moment I could see the war behind her eyes. The years of secrets pressing against her ribs, struggling to stay buried. And then, barely above a whisper, she said it. He's your father. Everything inside me stopped. The air in my lungs vanished. The floor beneath me might as well have cracked open because suddenly I was falling. I stared at her, my brain scrambling, rejecting, fighting to process what she had just said. I laughed, but it wasn't real. It was hollow, sharp, bitter. What did you just say? She didn't repeat it. She didn't need to. I shook my head, taking a step back. No, that's... My mother swallowed hard. The man, my father, stayed silent. He wasn't trying to convince me, wasn't scrambling to defend himself, because it was true. I felt something cold slither down my spine, something dark curling in my chest. All this time, her breath hitched. I wanted to tell you. Don't. My voice cut through hers, sharp and unforgiving. She flinched. I could barely breathe. My head was spinning, memories flashing. Times I had asked about my father, and she had dodged the question. The way she used to look when she thought I wasn't watching, like she was carrying something too heavy. Now I knew what it was. So what? I said, my voice rising. You were just never gonna tell me? You were just gonna let me live my life never knowing? Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't like that. Then what the hell was it like? She was shaking now, her hands trembling as she reached for me. Please, let me explain. I stepped back. Explain what? She inhaled sharply, but before she could speak, he did. It was complicated. My head snapped toward him. Don't. My voice was low, dangerous. You don't get to talk. Not to me. Something flickered in his eyes, something close to regret. I didn't care. My chest felt tight, my skin too hot, like I was coming apart from the inside. I turned back to my mother. Does Dad know? Her silence was the answer. My stomach twisted violently. Jesus Christ. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe, trying to think, but my thoughts were spinning too fast, slipping through my fingers before I could catch them. Then a horrifying thought hit me. I dropped my hands, eyes locked onto hers. Is that why you stayed? Is that why you never left? Tears spilled over her cheeks. It's not that simple. Bullshit. The word came out sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. You lied to everyone. Her face crumpled. I was trying to protect you. I laughed, the sound dry, humorless. Protect me? From what? The truth. She reached for me again, but I stepped back, the space between us growing, stretching. I couldn't be here. I couldn't breathe. I need to get out of here. Panic flashed across her face. No, please don't go. But I was already moving. I shoved past the man, the stranger who was supposed to be my father, out of the kitchen, through the hallway, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. She called my name, but I didn't stop. I hit the front door and yanked it open, stepping out into the cold night air. My hands were shaking. My mind was reeling. Nothing felt real anymore. I walked. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just needed away. Away from the house, away from them. Away from the suffocating weight of the truth. I could still hear her voice in my head, those 4 words ripping through my brain like a knife. He's your father. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath coming out in short, uneven bursts. This wasn't happening. This wasn't real. But it was. And nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't know how long I had been walking. Minutes? Hours? It didn't matter. The cold bit at my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was still spinning, replaying my mother's voice over and over again. "He's your father." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block it out, but it was there. It was always going to be there. A sharp gust of wind cut through my jacket, snapping me back to the present. I was on the sidewalk, streetlights stretching into the distance. The world was still moving like nothing had changed. But everything had. Footsteps behind me. I turned fast, heart hammering. It was her. She was out of breath, wrapped in a coat she must have grabbed in a hurry. "Please," she said, voice shaky. "Just let me talk to you." I exhaled hard, my pulse a war drum in my ears. "Talk." I let out a bitter laugh. "Now you want to talk?" She swallowed, stepping closer. "You ran. I had no choice." "Like you had no choice when you lied to me my entire life?" Her face twisted in pain. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." My voice rose. "Tell me why you thought it was okay to let me believe." My throat closed up, my breath catching. "You let me believe a lie." Her hands trembled at her sides. "I was trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I let out a sharp exhale, stepping forward. "You don't get to decide what's right for me." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a second I almost softened. But then I remembered she chose this. She chose to keep me in the dark. "Say something," I pushed. "Anything." She inhaled sharply. "I loved him. I always did." My stomach twisted. "So what?" I snapped. "You had an affair? That's your big secret." She flinched. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." She hesitated. And in that hesitation I knew. A chill ran down my spine. "Oh my God." I took a step back. "You never stopped." Her silence was an answer. My chest felt tight, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Dad doesn't know, does he?" Her face crumpled. "No." I ran a hand through my hair, letting out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Jesus Christ." She reached for me, but I pulled back fast. "You lied to me. You lied to him. You lied to everyone." Her breath hitched. "I thought I was protecting you." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Protecting me? From what?" "The truth." Her eyes glistened, but I wasn't done. "Did you ever plan on telling me? Or were you just gonna let me live my life never knowing?" She opened her mouth, closed it. I don't know." That hurt worse than anything else. "You don't know." My voice cracked. "You never even thought about it?" She was crying now. "I thought about it every single day." I clenched my jaw, trying to breathe through the rage curling inside me. Then another thought hit me, one so sharp, so sudden that it nearly knocked me off my feet. Did he know? Her breath caught. I exhaled sharply. Did he know who I was? Silence. My stomach dropped. "Mom." She shook her head, tears spilling. "Not at first." I closed my eyes, a sick, nauseating feeling rolling through me. And then, my voice was barely above a whisper. She wiped at her face, shoulders shaking. "He figured it out." A strangled breath left me. "When?" She hesitated. "Years ago." "Years ago." I staggered back. My vision blurred at the edges. "He's known for years?" Her face twisted in agony. I begged him not to say anything. I could barely process it. The weight of it was crushing. I let out a hollow, broken laugh. "And he just went along with it?" Her voice cracked. "I thought it was the only way to keep our family together." I was shaking now, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "And what about me?" I snapped. "Did you ever think about what this would do to me?" She covered her face, her body racked with sobs. "I didn't want to lose you." I exhaled sharply. "Too late." Her head snapped up. "Don't say that." But I meant it. The world had just cracked open beneath my feet, and nothing would ever be the same again. I turned, stepping away from her. "Wait," she pleaded. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The house was dark when I stepped inside. The silence felt heavier than before, like something had settled in the air, thick and unmoving. I shut the door behind me, my fingers still trembling. I didn't know how long I had been gone. Maybe hours. Maybe minutes. Time didn't make sense anymore. The floor creaked behind me. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I could feel her there. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was my uneven breath, the soft rustle of fabric as she shifted. "You came back." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Yeah. She exhaled softly, like she had been holding it in. I should have said more. Should have demanded more. An apology. An explanation. Something. But I didn't. Because none of it would change what had already happened. I turned, finally facing her. She stood in the dim glow of the hallway light, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding herself together. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red. She started, then stopped. I waited. She tried again. I know you hate me. I let out a slow, shaky breath. I don't know what I feel. Her face crumpled, but she nodded like she understood. I never wanted to hurt you. I clenched my jaw. Then why did you? She flinched like the words physically hit her. I should have walked away. I should have left it at that. But I didn't. Because despite everything, despite the anger, the betrayal, there was still something else. Something worse. Part of me still wanted to reach for her. I hated that. Hated myself for it. She took a small step forward, hesitating. I know I can't fix this. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I swallowed hard. You don't. A sharp inhale. I could see the hurt on her face, the way her lips trembled, but I couldn't take it back. Wouldn't. I stepped past her, heading for the stairs. Wait, she said, and for the first time there was something desperate in her voice. I stopped. Her breath was shaky. Can we try to move forward? I exhaled slowly, staring at the staircase ahead. Move forward. Like this was something that could be fixed. Like this was something that could ever be normal again. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see her in my peripheral vision. I don't know. Her face fell. For the first time she looked small. I hated that too. I turned back, stepping up the stairs. She didn't call after me again. She just stood there watching. And for the first time I wondered, when she looked at me, what did she see? A son? A mistake? Or something else entirely? I didn't want to know. I reached my room, shutting the door behind me. My chest felt tight, my pulse hammering. I pressed my back against the wood, squeezing my eyes shut. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt something. Instead, all I felt was a quiet, suffocating ache. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, the only light coming from my phone on the nightstand. The screen was still lit. An unsent message stared back at me. I don't know what to do. I hovered my thumb over the screen. Then slowly, I deleted it. And in the silence, I wondered if she was standing on the other side of the door, doing the exact same thing. Extended scene for deeper closure. Morning came too quickly. I hadn't slept. The house was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that sat heavy, waiting for something to break it. I walked downstairs, my body tense with the weight of last night. She was in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She looked up when I entered. Neither of us spoke. She wasn't wearing the same expression as last night. She wasn't pleading, wasn't breaking apart in front of me. She looked tired, drained. Maybe that was worse. I sat down across from her, not sure why. Maybe I was waiting for her to say something. Maybe she was waiting for me. She traced a finger along the rim of the cup. I thought you'd leave. I swallowed, my throat dry. I almost did. A slow nod. But you didn't. I looked away. No, I didn't. And that was the problem. She finally lifted the cup, took a small sip, then set it down again. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I let out a humorless breath. Good. Because they won't. She flinched but nodded. Yeah. The silence stretched between us. She sighed. Maybe it's best if I leave for a while. I stiffened. I should have agreed immediately. Should have let her walk away. But instead my chest ached. She was watching me carefully, waiting for an answer. I didn't give her one. She nodded, as if she already knew. Then quietly, I'll give you time. She stood, hesitating for just a second before walking out of the room. I didn't watch her go. I stared at the table, at the coffee cup she left behind. I should have felt relief. Instead, all I felt was something hollow. Something unresolved. Something that made me wonder if this was really the end, or just another beginning. Some lines aren't meant to be crossed. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered. But once you step over that edge, once you let the moment take you, there's no turning back. Can you walk away from something that changed everything? Can you pretend it never happened, burying it deep enough that it never resurfaces? Or will the weight of it pull you back, no matter how much you resist? This story doesn't end neatly because real life never does. Choices have consequences, but desire doesn't follow logic. So what would you do? Would you run? Confront it? Or would you find yourself standing at that same threshold again, wondering if some boundaries were meant to be broken all along?